what we're talking about this week is going to be kind of some typical and some not so typical ways of retaining residents. Um, and I have a bit of a different view, I think, than a lot of people do. But it has worked well for me over the last 25 years. So, I am pretty sure it works. And it's just a different approach in some ways. Some is pretty typical and some is a little bit different. So I think if it's okay with you, James, can we go ahead and get going?
Yes, I'll just keep letting people in as they show up, but go ahead.
All right. So what we're going to talk about today are kind of ways to reduce resident turnover. And a lot of this is just pretty straightforward. So I'm not going to, expound on a lot of these slides. I think a lot of it is pretty clear. But the first thing here I want to talk about is that turnover is generally your single biggest expense that you can actually control. So some things are kind of fixed, like taxes and insurance and some of those kinds of things. But if you can decrease turnover, you're going to see a big impact on your bottom line. It really is true. And so typically, there are some things you can do to decrease turnover, and there's some things that you really can't do. So if somebody's got a new job or somebody bought a house, you can't do much about that. But if there are other things that you can do to turn over, to decrease your turnover, and those are the things I want to talk about. But the other thing on this slide is to really just talk about why turnover is so expensive. And in my experience, it's going to cost you at least 1 month's rent. Plus, you're going to be seeing the costs for getting the unit turned. And that's going to be, painting and fixing up the floors and cleaning things out, marketing, having somebody show it. And all of that adds up. So your typical cost of somebody moving out is a month to 2 months rent. And that can have a um, big impact on your NOI at the end of the year. So we really want to think about things we can do that's going to prevent or decrease the turnover that's not going to cost too much. And so that's kind of what I want to focus on tonight. So here are the reasons, the typical reasons that if you were to look at surveys and a lot of the information that's out there in the property management world that we can do, or the reasons that people move, let me say that rather than what we can do, is that they have complaints about repairs and maintenance, e.g. work orders that aren't taken care of in a timely manner. So if somebody has something that's not working and you can't get it fixed in a timely manner, that's a big dissatisfier. If people feel unsafe, they're going to look for someplace else to live, even if it costs more. If it's a place that is not maintained very well, and people don't feel like they want to bring friends or family to where they live because they're ashamed of it in some way. So that can be the condition of the property. It could be the condition of the unit. It could be that the people hanging out scare people. And that leads into the neighbors that are out of control. So a lot of people, particularly the type of properties I tend to buy, which are family-oriented, blue-collar kind of properties. They don't want people who are having wild parties until 4 or 5 a.m. and having music that goes all hours of the night, strewing beer bottles and liquor bottles and things like that. It's a pretty big dissatisfier. And the other thing that is pretty frustrating to a lot of people is if you take good residents for granted, if you just expect them to continue to put up with things or to never recognize that they are really being a good tenant, and all your focus is on the bad guys or the people who aren't doing what you want. All right, so one of the things that is really important to people is keeping a unit in good repair. So one of the things that I always tell people, that's kind of that second bullet down, is that in a lot of jurisdictions, there is some limit, shall we say, to people being able to, property managers or owners being able to go into a residence apartment to see that it's being maintained, to keep it up. And so one of the things we always do is to put into our leases that we can enter their apartments with or without their permission as long as you give them a couple of days' notice. And a lot of that we do, we're saying we're doing maintenance, preventive maintenance. But there's enough variation that when you buy a property, one of your pieces of due diligence should be really to check with a local attorney to see what you need to have in your leases to be able to do that. One of the things we do is that every time we go into an apartment, we let people know that we're coming and if they want to be there. So if they want to be there to make sure that nothing happens to their property, we think they should be able to do that. So some of the times in our preventive maintenance, we will have staff work. I'm making this up, like from 1 p.m. to 9 p.m. So residents can be there to do the preventive maintenance and they can see what that looks like. One of the things we also do to try and decrease the frustration of people have by going into their apartments is that we'll put a notice on their door, under their door, that we're doing preventive maintenance on such and such a day, and we'll ask them if there's any little thing they would like to see fixed at that point, and they are to write that down on that piece of paper and leave that where the maintenance people can find it. So if they have a loose towel rack or they have a shower door that's loose, or they have a lock in the door that is starting to become loose, whatever it is, those little things that you are not likely to call in a work order for, but that are frustrating to people and that they may or may not have somebody to fix it, like water drips or whatever. If you let people tell you those kind of things, those little things they'd like to see fixed, then when your maintenance people go in to do preventive maintenance, they can fix that as well. Or if they don't have the time right then what they can do is they can put a work order in and they can leave a note that they put a work order in for this thing to be taken care of. It goes a long way to convincing residents that you care about them and that you're trying to keep the unit up. It also is a benefit to you because it really does help to keep your unit in better shape. Okay. So one of the things we also do is that after completion of a work order or a preventive maintenance, is that we'll have a leasing agent, not somebody in the maintenance office, call the resident to see if everything was done to their satisfaction. And we don't close out work orders, we don't close out preventive maintenance until the resident has said that things have been done to their satisfaction and that there isn't a problem. And so our time to fix a work order is typically within 48 hours, within 48 working days. unless it is what we say, flood, blood, or fire. Those things are emergent. In the winter, if people don't have heat, we try and get that fixed right away too. But most of the time, we give ourselves 48 hours to get things done. And the time starts when the work order goes in and it ends when the office staff, when the leasing staff have contacted the resident, and those people say everything is completed to their satisfaction. So we have one of our performance measures. That's one of our performance measures is the time to get a work order finished, right? And that's what that last one is. That goes a long way. It also, it prevents people coming back a month later, 2 months later, saying that somebody stole something. Because if there is an issue, a lot of times we try and make sure that on that follow-up call that everything is okay, it was done to the people's satisfaction, and there aren't any issues. Now, that doesn't mean that sometimes people can't discover that something's missing down the road and complain about it, but it decreases it significantly, and it actually does a CYA for us in terms of trying to make sure that we have documented that there aren't any problems. Okay, so this one is just a picture. This is one of our typical apartments, right? And it's something that looks good. Now, this is a working class apartment. If you really look at this, there is nothing that's expensive in these materials. These are all fairly, they're not real wood. They are, look at that vanity. It's kind of a wood looking thing. It's a molded piece on the top. It's not expensive, kind of for, kind of the, like the faucets and stuff. We're moving more to actually using flooring that looks like it's a wood kind of thing, and moving away from carpet like you're seeing down there. This was actually, I don't know, 2016, 2017, so it's 5 or 6 years old. But if you look at the kitchen countertops, they are not expensive. So you can do a little bit of paint and a little bit of upkeep and have it look like something that people would like to live in, right? So we don't spend a lot of money on this, but we do spend time trying to make sure that it looks inviting. And one of the things we almost always do is a two-tone paint job. We tend to use the same paint colors, the same 2 or 3 paint colors throughout a unit, and so we can save money that way. We also tend to offer some kind of an upgrade to people on their anniversary. And so instead of, we want you to sign your lease again, right, before you can live here, we're going to focus on, thank you for living with us for the last year, and we would like to celebrate your anniversary in some way, and give you some kind of recognition for your anniversary. And most of the time, we'll let them pick something that we would do to improve the unit anyway as an anniversary present. So it's just changing the mindset a bit. Okay. One of the things that nobody does, almost nobody, is to reward and recognize good residents. So there is a real tendency to focus on the people who don't pay their rent on time, who have the wild parties, who don't keep their units up. And we ignore people who basically follow the rules, pay their rent on time, are good neighbors, and we ignore them. We frankly ignore them. So I would much rather spend time on people who I would like to keep as a resident, with little things that recognize their how much we value them, and less time on people that are pains and you know what. If people don't want to do what we need them to do, get rid of them. Don't sit around and deal with it and trying to cajole them. If they can't do what you need them to do, then get them out and try and get people in who are going to do what you want them to do. So I think this is one of the things we do that most people don't do that really gets us a long way. So we will actually say thank you with thank you cards. So we will sometimes send thank you cards. At this time of the year going into spring, we'll just dump a packet of flower seeds in a thank you card, or we'll do something else like that. We will put them into drawings for residents who pay on time, and they get a gift card. We give people anniversary gifts if they have paid on time. So do you want a room painted? Would you like an overhead fan? Would you like to see if we can figure out how to put a microwave in? Now, most of these things are things that are going to benefit the apartment too, or the unit too, that's going to increase its value. But it's also seen as a good thing by the resident. We give on-time thank you vouchers. So one of the things we may want to do is now this is maybe something we talk more about in a future call, so I'm just going to mention it briefly. But there are things you can do to sort of say, if somebody wants to own their own home at some time in the future, you can give them, for every time they pay on time, a $50 credit. Now, it's not real money, it's a credit voucher towards the future purchase of a home. And you make a relationship with somebody who's a landlord who would like, or somebody wants to sell something. Every month they pay on time, they get a voucher. If they miss it, they lose that. The other things you can do is you can say that I'm making this up here. So the rents, you're wanting a rent of $1,500 a month. That's what you want, $1,500. But you tell them the rent is $1,600. And there is a late fee of another $50. But if they pay on or before the first, the price that they pay is $1,500. If it's on the second or later, it's $1,600. If it's after the fifth, the $1,650. So you are setting up in their mind that if they pay on or before the first, they get a $100 break on their rent. But that was really what I wanted in the first place, right? So what you're trying to do is set up a thing where we're really focusing on good residents, and we're giving them carrots like crazy. We're also going to try and order, I didn't know I did this, more than 4 walls and a floor. And we already talked about this. So we can do a survey of current residents, ask them something about what they may like or appreciate, and what they might be willing to pay extra for. So you can always do this. So if they would like to see a Wi-Fi or a big screen TV, you might be able to put one in and charge them an extra $25 for it, but it is yours, not theirs. They may want a washer dryer, and if you can do that, you do that. So the idea is, what else might you do that could increase your rent but would also make them feel good. All right. I think those are the main slides I have tonight. If you just kind of remember, if you're interested in seeing more that's free, we have a 2-hour webinar that you can go to, this passive wealth webinar, and just see what it is. And James normally puts these up on our YouTube channel, and we'll let him talk about that for just a minute.
Yeah, so what we've ended up doing is usually by Thursday, but sometimes it's Friday. I will take the Teaching Tuesdays and I'll edit them down and then actually post them on a YouTube channel. And I think what we're going to do next is actually create kind of a playlist just for Teaching Tuesdays, because we've gotten, I don't know, 8, 9 of them, something like that. So if you ever want to look one of these up, you can go onto the YouTube channel and look at them there. I also send out, when I advertise next week's Teaching Tuesday, I send out the replay link. So if you have to take off or you miss one or whatever it is, it's either on YouTube, or when you get the next one, the previous weeks will be at the bottom with a link for you.
All right, I think that's great. So next week, I'm actually away for a week, and James is going to be doing a presentation. What are you going to be talking about, James?
Is it next week or the week after that when you're coming back? Thought it was the
Oh
21st.
no, you're right. It's the following week. So next week, next Tuesday, I'm going to be doing a class. I'm just having to look at it. Is it's how do you know what raising rents are going to do to your bottom line? So how do we really figure out what that's going to do to our cash flow and our net operating income? And then the next one after that is James. And what are you going to be talking about?
I'm going to be talking about how to communicate with investors, what you can and can't say, how to keep track of them, how to establish relationships with them. So when you are ready to approach them about an opportunity, you've kind of laid the foundation for them.
All right, that sounds good. So what I do, only other thing I can do, want to say before we go to just answering questions like we normally do, is that about 20 after, we're going to have a hard stop on this, because we've got another Teaching Tuesday following this on residential real estate, that we're going to talk about how do you find good property managers. And you're welcome to stay or not. And so we've got about 20 minutes to take questions, 25 minutes to take questions. And I'm just going to open it up, and I'll let James kind of handle any of the questions there. But feel free, there isn't a lot of us online. So anybody who would like to ask questions, please open your mic and finish them and ask them. And if there's anything in the chat box, I'm going to let James take care of that.
Hey, James, it's Erin and Nicole.
Hey.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
This is probably a very rookie question, but what platform do you use to track work orders, like how people submit those? Is there a specific one that you recommend or that you utilize for your properties?
What I'll tell you, that's a good question. Almost once you have more than a couple or 3 properties, people are going to start using some kind of property management software. And almost all of those software programs have a work order system within them where they can, work orders come in. Most of the time, work orders come in through your website, where people can put up the work order online. And just, they kind of log in and they say what the problem is or what their unit is, but they can also call in. So I'd say by far the most common is some kind of a property management software that you're going to be using. And if you don't have enough units yet to be using those, because they can be a little bit on the pricey side, then what you need to do is have some kind of an Excel spreadsheet or something where you keep track of them, and that you have some kind of handyman for the most part that you can call to go in and fix things. That answer
Okay.
that, Erin?
Yeah, that answers that question for me. And then as far as like tracking when people have anniversaries and things like that, is that something that's usually also kind of baked into the software, or do you have a different way of keeping track of the rewards and that sort of stuff?
Most of the time that is sort of baked in because it will show up as lease renewal time, as when the lease expires and needs to be renewed. And so I just don't treat it as a lease renewal. I treat it as an anniversary. And so it's just changing how we address them.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right, other questions?
Hey, Nicheole, this is Jason. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Jason?
Good, good. Hey, one thing I struggle with is when we go and we do our yearly check on properties, I kind of struggle with, and again, this isn't, I like your whole idea of focusing on the good tenants and not the bad tenants, which is exactly opposite what I do. But, I look at, things like cracked tile, just things that are clearly abuse. And, they pay on time, they're great tenants in other ways, but just things that should not be broken are broken. They don't complain about it. They don't say anything about it. But when I go and I see cracked tiles or a backsplash that's cracked, and you wonder how the heck that happened, it doesn't happen in my house. Do you fix it, or do you just wait, or it just seems as though you start fixing these things, and then darn well 6-8 months later, same kind of thing's going to be happening. So it's just this perpetual, dribbling of money out for no reason. What are your thoughts on that? Or is there something I'm doing wrong with who I'm getting as tenants?
I don't think it's that so much as that I don't think you're probably doing anything wrong getting tenants, although I don't know what your process is. But two things I'll say. Number one, in the first year, we are going to, when we first come in, our lease clearly says that you can be evicted for things other than non-payment. And part of that is the maintenance of the unit. The first thing we do is when somebody comes in, so for the first quarter, we're going to have somebody in briefly for 15 minutes or so once a month. And we do a check, and we kind of say, this needs to be kept a little cleaner, or, this is, please pay attention to this. And so that we set up the expectations very early and we hold people to it. And then we do quarterly or semi-annual inspections. We don't leave it once a year because we're actually focusing on preventive maintenance. And so we're making sure that we don't have water leaks. We are changing out smoke detectors. One quarter, we will do electric checks of all of the electric outlets. One quarter, we will, one of the things, depending on what kind of a furnace you have or air conditioner, we'll change out the filters. So we have a preventive maintenance checklist. And once a quarter, so most of our properties, we do it once a quarter. Now, I still have a lot of single family properties, and those we kind of go in semi-annual, but we still have a checklist. And we keep that checklist as evidence that we have done preventive maintenance in case of somebody says they don't keep up the apartment and stuff. And so if you are seeing things like broken tiles, we may fix the first one. But after that, when we fix that, we say, look, if this happens again, we'll fix it, but we're going to charge it back to you for the repair costs, right? So unless you have a really good story you're going to pay for this. So when somebody loses their keys and we have to get them new keys, or if something gets stuck down a toilet because a kid put something down it, our lease basically says that you are going to be responsible for the cost of fixing these things that were caused by you. And we will fix it, but it's going to charge back, and it will be charged first before you we add in your lease. So the key is to not be to make sure that your lease says that the first part of your payment goes to anything like this, and then it gets added on to your lease. Otherwise, people don't pay it and somebody ends up, needing to evict them. You're never going to see that back. But the other thing is that if somebody goes in and it's immaculate and it's just beautiful and more than you could expect, you're going to do something back that says, wow, we really, really appreciate this. And here's a voucher for a pizza at 50% off, and you can get those for free in a lot of places, right? So you just have to go find those things, but you make it clear why you are rewarding or recognizing. And you put up on some of your websites or some of these things, boy, I'd like to really thank Tenants, Murphy's, for all of the good things they did. I mean, we went in and this place was immaculate and we really appreciate it. And so you do the things that reward and recognize the behavior you want, right? And link that with things that are going to make people feel uncomfortable for things that you don't want.
So even things like cleanliness,
yes,
you will address
absolutely.
with them. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
So one of the things is that, if we are basically dealing with blue collar, a lot of blue collar, or, kind of C-class properties, B- properties, and more than a few of them are on some kind of, well, some of them, not all of them, are on some kind of a voucher system. And they want to stay. If you keep your apartments up and they look nice, or the other thing we do is we try to keep our rents 5% or so below what the competition is, so that if people need to move, it's going to cost them to move and they're going to have to move someplace that is more expensive. So our average, I mean, I don't know what my average is right now, but a year and a half ago, our average length of stay was about 3 years in an apartment. The average is a year or less across the country.
Wow.
So we do things to try and focus. Now, does that mean it always works? Absolutely not. We always have a few, people that you just get them out because they're a pain in the what. But we'd much rather have people who are not pains, who are really doing what you need them to do, and you just recognize them like crazy. Focus on the good, and the people who are really giving you a lot of grief, just get rid of them. Figure out a way to get rid of them. That's
Great.
there aren't any. It's trial and error, a lot of it, but that's the general idea.
Thank you.
You betcha.
Nicheole, this is Rob.
Hi, Rob.
Hi. Regarding the maintenance stuff, the last place that we lived was a house that we rented before we bought our current house, and our landlord, I think she was a realtor and a first-time landlord, I think, and she had us doing she'd bought like a home maintenance insurance policy or something along those lines.
Yeah.
A warranty, I don't remember what it was called. And it was in our lease, so we had to pay, I think, a $75 deductible every time somebody had to come out to the house. Because that's what she was charged, apparently. And so she just passed it along to us. I don't know how you feel about that kind of thing. I don't know if that's a good idea or not. Had kind of mixed, I could kind of see where she was coming from with it, but trying to discourage people from having little, like, minor things that they want to always have somebody come out and do. We weren't that way, but on the other hand, it kind of annoyed me a little bit because so I don't know what you think. Do you think that's not a good idea? That's something like that?
Well,
Or maybe it would apply in certain situations and not in others.
Yeah, I mean, my sense is that may work better with single family homes, because a lot of times you can buy these home warranty programs, and there is typically a monthly charge for that, as well as a service charge, so to speak.
Right.
So that there may be some times where that is helpful. If I was going to do that, I don't know, that would be my first choice for apartments and mobile home parks.
Okay.
But I could see where you might figure out something, because again, they're not going to be the core or the bottom line of what we're trying to do is to make sure we have a good preventive maintenance program in place, because it's cheaper in the long run.
Sure, benefits you as well. Yeah.
Right. And so if you are sending somebody out quarterly or even semi-annually to just take a look and fix the things that are kind of that you would want fixed, and there you can put them on a list, so to speak, right? The little things you just need to get fixed in that preventive maintenance. Then what I can see is if all of a sudden your dishwasher stops working, or you have a leak in your washer, or something else like that happens. A lot of them are focused on appliances and or HVACs, things like that, the more of the systems things. That if those things go down, I can see where having something like that in place would be helpful. And maybe the first one is on me, and if something happens after that, after a certain amount, it becomes your issue. But what I don't want people to do is to not call when I've got a problem because they want to pay that fee, because that typically is going to fall back and something that I need to fix down the road.
Makes sense. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Well, that leads to another question I hadn't thought of it before too. When you're talking about your maintenance list, the quarterly inspection where you have this list of maintenance items. How did you develop this list? Did you just come with experience, or is that some kind of more of a standard property management type list that people just follow and know about? Or
I would think it's a mix, but I would think most property management companies have some sort of a maintenance checklist. So part of this is a CYA kind of thing that you have, that you can document that certain things were done, so that if something happens, like if there's a fire or something like that, you can prove that you have been diligent in trying to make sure that you've kept up the unit. I'm sure a lot of the property management software has something where there's a checklist, but I also know that we have added things over time. So we don't check all the electric outlets to make sure that they're good and that they don't have leaks every quarter. So we'll do that once a year, right? We don't change out the smoke detectors every quarter. We do that twice a year. Every quarter, we're going to check for water leaks, because that can get really expensive. We may change out the filters once a quarter or once every 6 months. It's those kinds of things that are not necessarily on a on a standard checklist, but we do things like the filters. We do them because we want to extend the life of the
HVAC.
water heater, the HVAC, or something like that, right? So that we don't have the furnace, so that we don't have these issues coming up down the road.
And you say we, is that because you have in-house management? And are you like vertically integrated in that way, or is it that you vet your property managers and say, listen, these are things that I would like you to do with my property? Or
Yeah.
Both?
We have 2 property management companies that manage most of our own assets and manage several other people's assets. But there's still some properties that are managed by other property management companies. And what I have done when we sit down with those is we'll say, here are the things that we expect, that we want done. And it's a discussion and I don't know what the word is, but we try and negotiate with them those things that we want. And we don't get everything we want, but if there's some things, preventive maintenance is fairly important to me because of I've seen a couple of properties that have gotten where something bad happened to somebody because of lack of maintenance. Somebody died in a fire because this wasn't it was property we were looking at buying, but an elderly woman died in a fire in a mobile home, basically because she had one electric outlet in the whole mobile home that was working, and she had all of these what am I trying to say, these
electrical consumers in one outlet.
With all of the kind of the protectors, and I guess the things where you can plug several things in, extension cords. And there was a electrical fire, and she died. And they couldn't prove that there was any kind of maintenance, and I don't suspect there was. And I would be sick if something like that happened. Plus, you can lose, they got sued and they should have been sued, right? So preventive maintenance, and there's a couple other things that are fairly important to me that I'm not willing to give on too much. So if it's my company, I can deal with the CEO of, so I don't manage a lot of this myself. I have CEOs that manage that, and we just talk and kind of they implement. But it is also trying to you can't control everything from a distance, and I have too many properties in too many places. And so I spend a fair amount of time trying to find the right property manager that I can work with and that kind of sees the world in kind of the same way I do.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. I think we have time for a couple more questions if we have any.
I have a question.
Please.
Hi. You said a lot of your tenants are voucher tenants.
I wouldn't say a lot, but we certainly have a number of them. Yes.
Do you prefer those tenants over, like, I know you said you have a lower turnover rate than most other people. Do you think it's because of your lower rent or because of like the voucher tenants? Because they typically stay longer, correct?
You're right. They do. They tend to stay longer. I think it's a mix. I like voucher tenants. I have no problem with them. And there's more and more jurisdictions or more and more counties that are coming on that basically say that if you can't discriminate against them, you have to include them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but what I don't want is to have that be the majority of my tenants, Because the other thing we know is as federal budgets get tighter, HUD, which is the one that basically controls a lot of the Section 8, and the VA, which controls the HUD VASH programs, are losing budgets.
Oh, okay.
And so what we have seen is that the rate of rent that they pay is not going up like it used to. So I do like them. And I think that they are going to stay. But the other side of that is that those programs have yearly inspections that are fairly thorough. So you have to keep your units up anyway.
Yeah.
So I think it's an issue of both how you treat your tenants, as well as those kinds of programs, as well as just focusing on people who are doing things right. So I don't know that I could say that it was any one. I think they all have an impact. That was a really good and insightful question, Jennifer.
Also, I have one more thing to add.
Sure.
In case Erin's still here. I know she was asking about software. Inago is a good one, and it has maintenance portals on it, and it's pretty
cool.
cost effective.
How do you spell that?
It's INNAGO.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, one more question. Anybody?
Do you typically sign a 1-year lease initially and then move to a month-to-month, or do you re-sign on the anniversary for another year, or do you do it some other way?
No, we typically we'll do a 1-year lease to begin with. Now, sometimes if it's in a county where they are not anti-landlord, so to speak, if somebody wants a 2 or 3 year lease, we will give them a break on the rent, or we will say we won't increase the rent for those 2 to 3 years, right? Which a lot of times people see as a benefit. But if you go so on the anniversary time, we will sign another document sometimes. Sometimes we won't. But if we don't sign another lease, then what we make sure is that what they do sign is is kind of the rules of the property, which is it's not a lease. People can leave if they want to after 2 months notice or something like that. But what it does lay out is what are the rules and regulations of the property that they agree to and sign. And so basically the difference between a lease and that is that, they can leave when they want to, but you still have the same requirements in place, right? That from the rules of the property that you can hold people to because they've signed that they agree to abide by these rules. And if they don't, you can evict them. Did that answer that?
Yes, absolutely. And it certainly depends, I guess, in a more landlord-friendly state versus not.
Yeah.
We deal a lot in Baltimore, so yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's some people are really good at making that city figure out how to make it work, but the last thing it is landlord friendly.
Yeah.
So, all righty. So I think we're going to leave it there if there's no more questions. James, have you got anything? James?
Sorry about that.
James?
Yes, I'm here. So a lot of people do both residential and multifamily. So we've got a couple of people that are experts in residential. So if you have any interest in that, we're just going to keep this Zoom call open, and they'll start at 7:30. But whatever you want to do, it's totally up to you. And I'm going to put a slide up here basically saying, we'll come back on at 7:30. But besides that, wonderful seeing everybody. Rob, I hope you're feeling better. And we'll talk to everybody real soon.
Yep. Talk to you next
you.
week. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Nicole.
You betcha. Thank you for coming on, Yan.
Thank you, Nicole.
Bye, Aaron. So if the line is still open and we're just waiting for, if people aren't getting off, is there anything you just want to talk about or ask about that doesn't have anything to do with what the topic we're on? I'd be happy to just chat with people to get to know people a little bit, what you're doing and kind of what you're working on. Answer any questions, or you can go get a break while we're waiting. Okay.
If you don't mind me asking, how many properties do you have?
I don't know actually how many properties, but I have a little over 6,000 doors.
Nice.
So
Which states would you recommend to get more properties in?
I have properties in 11 states. So Maryland, Pennsylvania, Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky. And then most of my properties are on the West Coast: Oregon, Idaho, Washington, Montana, Wyoming, and Nevada.
Oh, wow.
So, but I'm originally from the West, so that's kind of where my natural stomping grounds are out there.
Yeah.
I guess some of the states that are most easier to deal with are West Virginia, Kentucky. Pennsylvania isn't too bad. Nevada isn't too bad. Montana, Wyoming aren't too bad. So I think it has to do this is a gross statement, but in general, the red states are a little bit easier on landlords than are the blue states.
I've noticed.
So, and there's Jane and Sharon, who are going to be leading the next presentation. So if you have any questions for them too, just feel free to ask questions, and we'll kind of just try and keep this going a little bit, or go get some water or something to drink for a
Yeah, I
couple
think I'm
minutes.
gonna go grab some water, but I will be back.
All right, glad to hear it.
Okay.
Grab a pen too, pen and pencil.
Okay. I will.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Nicole.
Yeah.
I have a question
Hey.
for you.
Sure.
I was just wondering about today's market. Do you think we're in seller market 2 right now, or we are buyer market 1 right now?
I really think we have just flipped over, and I think we're in a buyer's market. I think most of the evidence, now that's not going to be every place in the country by any stretch of the imagination, but most people, most evidence to me looks like we have moved over into a buyer's market, but we're still fairly early. So excuse me, the reason I say this is you're seeing prices come down. You're seeing days on market increase. You're seeing concessions starting to be offered. All of those things are evidence of a buyer's market. I think we're in early stage. We are not near the bottom of the market by any stretch of the imagination.